So, welcome to the book of Nehemiah. We're going to get into chapter 1 today, talking more about the beginning of the Second Temple period. So, Nehemiah is a Jew who is living in Babylon. He has not gone to Jerusalem as of chapter 1. So, we don't know a ton about who this person is. He's not necessarily like an amazing prophet or anything, but he is somebody who's very devout. Uh, he is probably somebody. I mean, he's obviously born during the exile, the Babylonian exile of the Jews. He is from a family who chose not to go back to Jerusalem when Cyrus said so. So we think actually Nehemiah was born somewhere shortly after that time that the first set of Jews went back. That was with Ezra and that group. They went back to Jerusalem as soon as Cyrus said to rebuild the temple and to reestablish Jerusalem and those things. So so while that first group of Jews has gone to Jerusalem, they're doing their thing. They're rebuilding the temple. They're doing that. Nehemiah is still in Babylon. His family is one that has some influence in Babylon. That's probably one of the reasons why they didn't leave, because they had some prominence and influence and wealth and opportunities. In fact, Nehemiah, we're going to find out here soon, has a connection with the king of Persia. So that's is a good possibility why he stayed. His family stayed, basically. He had some influence there. So let's jump into chapter 1. As we begin, I want to give a little bit more context with this as well. This is an excerpt out of the Between the Testaments article that we've read a little bit from recently. It's one of the BYU's religious studies articles. They said, after gaining control of the region, the people of exile focused on rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. The books of Haggai and Zechariah were written during this period, while Ezra recounts these events from a later perspective. These accounts are fragmentary and unclear on the chronology of rebuilding the temple. The Jerusalem community, under the political direction of the governor Zerubbabel, who's a descendant of the old royal house of David, and the religious direction of the high priest Jeshua, rebuilt the altars and structure of the temple, establishing Jerusalem as the center of the religious hierarchy. This temple was only a shell of the former one built by Solomon, but its establishment centered the religious activities of Judea in Jerusalem for the returned exiles. Dedication of the temple in 515 BC brought religious centrality back to Jerusalem. After the mysterious disappearance of Zerubbabel, Jeshua reappropriated the office of high priest into a central political figure appointed by the ruling nation, creating a small priestly temple state that received autonomy from the Persian Empire. These events created religious centrality in Jerusalem, but the city remained a place of insecurity with voids in religious and political law. So that's just to kind of give you a bit of a broader perspective of all these things that are happening at this time. So let's jump into chapter 1 now. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hachaliah. And it came to pass in the month Chislew, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan the palace. So this is, again, more Babylonian reconciling here. That Hanani, one of my brethren, came, he and certain men of Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. So he's talking about two groups of Jews here. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity there in the province are in great affliction and reproach. So the wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. So left of the captivity, as well as the Jews that so he's talking about concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. So he's talking about the people in the surrounding area of Jerusalem, as well as those that did go back. And they're saying that it's tough. It's horrible back there. It's hard. The wall is broken down, so there's no defenses. The gates have been burned. It's really chaotic and hard to do everything. Verse 4, and it came to pass when I heard these words that I sat down and wept and mourned certain days and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And I said, I beseech thee, O Lord God of heaven, the great and terrible God, that keepeth covenant and mercy for them that love him and observe his commandments. Let thine ear now be attentive, and thine eyes open, that thou mayest hear the prayer of thy servant, which I pray before thee now day and night, for the children of Israel thy servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against thee, both I and my father's house have sinned. We have dealt very corruptly against thee, and have not kept the commandments, nor the statutes, nor the judgments, which thou commandest thy servant Moses. Remember, I beseech thee, the word that thou commandest thy servant Moses, saying, If ye transgress, I will scatter you abroad among the nations. But if ye turn unto me, and keep my commandments, and do them, though there were of you cast out unto the uttermost part of the heaven, yet will I gather them from thence, and will bring them unto the palace that I have chosen to set my name there. Now these are thy servants and thy people, whom thou hast redeemed by thy great power and by thy strong hand. O Lord, I beseech thee, let now thine ear be attentive to the prayer of thy servant, and to the prayer of thy servants, who are desired to fear thy name and prosper. I pray thee, thy servant, this day, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man, for I was the king's cupbearer. So a couple things we learn about this. One is, of course, Nehemiah is really sad about the situation the Jews are in as they're back in Jerusalem. There's a group that stayed, that didn't get part of the exile. Then there's a group that returned from the exile. And they're trying to figure out how to work together with people like the Samaritans and other groups around them to deal with what's going on. So there's still some fighting, some conflict, some other issues as they're trying to rebuild Jerusalem and their religious center, the temple, everything else, and have a place to live that is safe and secure. He's worried about them, and he's really praying and concerned for them, which is great. He is obviously devout. He's somebody who's he really understands his culture and his history, and he knows, I am a Jew. I'm a part of this tribe, this culture, and this family. And while he is in Babylon still, he understands and has some sympathy and wants to help those who are in Jerusalem. That last line there, for I was the king's cupbearer, is an interesting line. So he is the cupbearer of the king of Persia. This is an important point because during this time, and it's King Artaxerxes the First is the king. We're going to learn a little bit more about him in the next chapter. But at this time, it's a relatively peaceful time, so there wasn't like major wars happening, but there's always coups. There's always someone trying to gain power. So poisoning the king to get him out of the way was a very subtle way to do it. They didn't have the chemistry we have today to detect things, for poisonings and stuff like that. So it was a common thing to do. So as a cupbearer, it was your job to make sure that that drink was not poisoned. If that drink's poisoned, then you get killed. Basically, you're going to be you've contributed to the death of the king. So it was Nehemiah's job to make sure the king was not being poisoned. Basically, is what he did. So that's a place of high trust with the king. He dealt directly with the king. Hey, king, this is your drink. I have checked it. It's not poisoned. Basically. So that's what they had. That's what they did. That's just how it works. So that's what he's doing for the king. So let's jump in the next chapter to learn a little bit more about Nehemiah and King Artaxerxes.